Let's talk about the famous Jeffrey Epstein list. For some time now, since the death of Jeffrey Epstein, in fact, they say that a number of fairly large number of VIP men, rich and famous men, have been quaking in their boots or terrified that Jeffrey Epstein's client list of the VIP men who enjoyed his hospitality on what they called Pedo Island, his island in the Caribbean, and they were flown down there on what they called the Lolita Express, which was his private jet. And they say that nefarious things went on there, that young girls were procured for sex, and these important men at the time of their lives, sometimes with girls that were underage. So for some time, all of these people have been worried. Now, they say that on the list, this doesn't necessarily mean that they took part in anything unlawful or nefarious, but, you know, Donald Trump is known to be an associate of Jeffrey Epstein, so was Bill Clinton, and the list goes on. So, today, though, the Department of Justice over in the States closed the case, finding that there was nothing on this list that proved any criminal activity, if indeed the list existed at all, and the FBI has subsequently, as a result, closed their investigation. So this, in effect, if they were ever guilty, exonerates Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and of course our very own Prince Charming, Prince Andrew, the not so grand old Duke of York. So what's going on here? Let's talk to American attorney and journalist Shondell Summer. Welcome, Shondell.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Before we talk, let's have a look at Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokesman, what she had to say on the Epstein files today on C-SPAN. Have a look.
The Trump administration is committed to truth and to transparency. That's why the Attorney General and the FBI Director pledged at the President's direction to do an exhaustive review of all of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and his death. And they put out a memo in conclusion of that review. There was material they did not release because, frankly, it was incredibly graphic and it contained child pornography, which is not something that's appropriate for public consumption. But they committed to an exhaustive investigation. That's what they did, and they provided the results of that. That's transparency.
Do you agree, Shondell? Is that transparency?
Well, they did a review. How thorough it was, I guess, remains to be seen. But at this point, if they close the case, there will be the ability of attorneys or other individuals to do freedom of information request to get the entire file and determine what's in it. They're going to redact a lot of the information about who the victims were. They may redact information about people who are innocent, whose names just happen to be in the file. But basically, they've already released most of the damaging, if you will, information about it. The associations between Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein is well known, well documented. There's the references to Bill Clinton, Alan Dershowitz, and of course Donald Trump. But all of those individuals claim merely a social connection to Jeffrey Epstein and not some type of lewd or lascivious participation in any behavior that Jeffrey Epstein was known for. Yeah,
you see, far be it from me to leap to the defense of all these very important, powerful men who've been associated with Jeffrey Epstein and may or may not have visited what we call Pedo Island, his private island down in the Caribbean. Far be it from me to sort of defend them, but the fact that they could be on lists compiled by Epstein, even passenger manifests on his private jet, the fact that they are recorded as visiting this island doesn't prove that they took part in nefarious activities, does it? I assume this is the nature of why the FBI have kind of abandoned the case, that they've got no proof of any wrongdoing down there.
I agree with you. I think being on a flight log or simply being in a criminal's contact list in their black book, I think is what they're referring to it as, does not necessarily mean you participated in any kind of nefarious activities. And I've always felt like, and I know this was a very unpopular opinion, that Prince Andrew kind of got a raw deal because of the fact that the only real evidence leaking him to Victoria Jeffrey was the fact that there was a photograph, but when pushed, Miss Jeffrey's attorneys could not produce the original of the photograph. So I've always thought that that was suspicious, and perhaps he was being tied into something that was not necessarily inappropriate behavior.
Yeah, you would argue, though, you would say, well, if he was entirely innocent and had nothing to hide, why on earth would he give Virginia Giuffre $12 million not to pursue him in the civil court? So there's two sides to that argument, but you're right, he's denied any wrongdoing, and as such, we sort of have to accept that. And of course, the result of this development today will be that Prince Andrew will be able to fly to the States again, not worrying about possibly having his collar felt by the FBI. So it's quite a good day for him. What about, though, Donald Trump? I mean, of course, critics are saying he's organised this. He's organised the closing of this case, because if the case went forward, it would be very bad news for him. What do you think about that, Shondell?
Well, I find it interesting that the people attacking him are his strongest devotees. They are the MAGA base, and they are, by their very nature, conspiratorially oriented. And the idea that there was no client list has irked them, especially Elon Musk, who has in the past suggested there was a connection between Epstein and Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump was going to appear in the Epstein files. So it's curious to me that they have really been so outraged by the fact that Donald Trump's not in any of these documents, at least according to the FBI and the DOJ. However, that's kind of the nature of conspiracies. I guess they go for you and against you.
Yeah.
The connection between Epstein and Donald Trump, to me, was always tenuous. Donald Trump had said he wasn't a fan of Epstein, that they had had some falling out over money, and he never really associated with him after that. But, you know, Jeffrey Epstein was a fixture in those Palm Beach circles. And so, yes, you do make associations, and they might not necessarily be the most upstanding individuals.
So Elon Musk, formerly the president's best friend, now his worst enemy, as it were, he tweeted in response to this, "This is the final straw." Of course, he tweeted previously during his sort of falling out with President, you know, Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. You know, that was his big bombshell. But
he took it back. He said he went too far, which tells me his lawyers got to him and said, hey, you're going to get sued for libel, and you've got a lot of money to put out there on the table.
Yeah, exactly right. And again, you know, it depends what we mean by client list. If Epstein had a list of friends may have included Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Dershowitz, whoever, who he flew down to his island for a weekend of fun or whatever, you know, unless you've got nefarious detailed suggestions that laws were broken then, there's nothing wrong with being on this list. The suggestion, of course, was that Epstein himself, arguably quite a nefarious individual, was keeping a client list with a view to blackmailing these people. Now, that is what both the Department of Justice and the FBI have dismissed. They've said that there's no credible evidence that Epstein had a client list to blackmail prominent individuals. So that, I think, is at the heart of this. Whatever Epstein was providing for these people, whatever he was doing with them, he didn't keep written records of any potential law breaking. Ergo, all that they've got is lists of names, I assume.
That's correct. However, Pam Bondi, in a previous interview, had suggested that the list was on her desk. And that is what has infuriated the MAGA base and also Elon Musk because of the statement she made. Even one of Trump's most inflammatory allies, a woman named Laura Loomer, has suggested that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, be fired for making that statement if the list did not exist. And of course, there's always going to be some type of suspicion around the death of Jeffrey Epstein because he was in federal custody, and you're not supposed to be able to have access to items which would allow you to commit suicide when you're in federal custody. You know, they're supposed to have cameras that watch people who are suicide risks, but yet he was able to commit suicide supposedly because the cameras were out. So that is always going to be right up there with the greatest conspiracies in the history of the world, is whether or not Jeffrey Epstein was murdered by some person who's rich and powerful and did not want the information that he has to come out.
Yeah, well, that element of the potential suicide or not, was he murdered and all that, plus what we're talking about, trust me, this will keep the National Enquirer going for about the next 20 years at least. Here's one thing that sort of I find slightly uncomfortable about all this, Chandel. It is that, you know, again, we've got to be careful of saying about what the hell was going on, but, you know, in all of this, in this entire saga of the life of Jeffrey Epstein and the men that he entertained, and we know that there were a lot of young women around, you know, in kind of quite suspicious circumstances. None of it was particularly sort of savoury in its nature. So something was going on here, but I don't think anyone will ever be nailed for it. But you know what makes me uncomfortable in all of this? This is a story of men playing, having fun with young women. In all of this, one person has gone to jail, and it's a woman, Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, I'm not saying that she doesn't deserve to be in jail, but it's uncomfortable to me that she's the only person taking the rap for whatever went on here.
Well, Jeffrey Epstein actually had, there was a prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein,
yeah, I suppose you're
but he
right
basically
there.
got a slap on the wrist, probationary home confinement type of sentence, and was out again. And then they were re-upping that prosecution during sort of the Me Too era. And you're right, Ghislaine, and you probably can say it better than I can.
It's Ghislaine. It's all like
Ghislaine is serving an incredibly lengthy sentence simply for being the procurer of young women for Jeffrey Epstein. And the bottom line is that for women, besides the obvious signal that you're going to get in trouble for whatever men do, besides what the point you were making, the sad thing is that women would stoop to such type of behavior in order to please some man, in order to satisfy his sexual perversion. And that's what's really sad, especially a woman like her who comes from some standing in society and did not necessarily have to kowtow to someone like Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, I guess there's a lot of money involved for her and for the victims, if you like. How's it playing over there in the States, Chandel? Because, I mean, it's quite a big story over here, but I'd imagine it's pretty massive over there, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting. It is kind of a bi-worldly story. You've got the Prince Andrew element, which kind of keeps, I guess, people in the UK interested. And then you've got the whole Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Alan Dershowitz, all these other big names over here that keeps everyone interested. So it is a very interesting and fascinating story. But the most important thing that's come out is the schism between Elon Musk and the fact that Elon Musk seems to have some insider info as to Donald Trump being on that list. And the way it was so summarily dismissed is really fueling conspiracy theories about the fact that, you know, Trump just controls everything. I mean, he doesn't really seem to care what the the backlash is going to be, probably because he's a lame duck president and he's not running again. So I think he just pretty much thinks he can do whatever he wants. And he has all of his minions who follow his orders to do whatever he suggests is in his best interest. So I think that's kind of the story behind it, is how quickly it dissolved in terms of any information.
Yeah, it's going to be the new big conspiracy theory subject. There's no doubt about that. As I say, we'll be reading about this in the National Enquirer in 20 years' time. I guarantee you. You know, JonBenet Ramsey. When was that? When did she?
That had to have been in the
early 90s, late 80s, and they still write about it every week, don't they?
Well, they found out so much more information, and the chemical testing has been improved since the time that it happened. They've pretty much exonerated the parents, and I guess we'll never know who actually did that, but it's a very sad and chilling tale of murder in the United States, no question about it.
Yeah, I mean, but it is that, just like this, the Epstein files, it is that element, the element of not knowing. And that vacuum is always filled by the conspiracy theories, and that's what sells supermarket tabloids, if you know what I mean.
Well, not to mention the media, because especially in the JonBenet Ramsey case, the media fueled those indictments. The media was the one who really targeted the parents.
Yeah, I know.
And as a result, they were investigated and eventually exonerated, but the media companies that did that were sued, and Mr. Ramsey, John Ramsey, won significant amounts of money for the very troubling period of time when he was accused without a trial.
Absolutely, absolutely. But again, these cases are fascinating, and the Epstein files are also fascinating. I dare say, as I say, we'll be talking about these for many years to come. Chandel, how excellent to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. That's Chandel Sommer, American attorney and journalist about the Epstein files. Interesting stuff.